It's not very often that I come in with lots of hyperbole about a game, but genuinely Dungeon Clawler might well be my favourite game of 2024, and it's certainly one of my favourite games of 2024. It's a roguelike deck builder that doesn't feel like one because it's doing something unique and interesting. And in the same way that lots of people are holding Balatro as their game of the year, I think lightning has struck twice, and Dungeon Clawler deserves to be held in that same god tier level of awesomeness, because what's here is absolutely stunning, and it's still in early access with more content to come, which only makes me delighted and gleeful for what's to come for this game. Dungeon Clawler is a roguelike deck builder where you choose a character and try to navigate through a 20 level or floor dungeon, battling different enemies, hopefully surviving them, and upgrading your character and adding things into your deck. But your deck and all of your actions that take place in a battle run through your claw machine. And so your deck is the items that go into the claw machine. And then what you do for your attack and defences is use your claw to pick up the objects that are inside it. Hope it stays in the claw, because if you've ever been to a seaside, you know some of those things are more limp-wristed than I am. And they will slide out in this game just like everything else. But when it's deposited in the exit chute, all of the different attack swords or maces or axes or whatever it is that you've picked up, along with the defensive shields that you've got and the status ailment or affecting items that you've picked up along the way, will all play out in a you do your bit, then the enemies do their bit, back and forth, trying to work out how to survive each battle. When you go into a battle, you get two chances to try and grab what you want with your claw, and you're always trying to decide where can I go that gives me the biggest bang for my buck, whether that's attacking, defending, or adding on some status ailments that can maybe mitigate some of the things that are coming in from your enemies, or beefing yourself up for future attacks. Enemies get exponentially harder to deal with over time, particularly when it comes to bosses, but you can always see what their next move is going to be because it's displayed above their head, and that helps you determine what you're going to prioritise next. So it could be enemies attack you directly for damage, it could be that they're buffing themselves or debuffing you, and you'll be able to see what they're going to do in advance, so you can kind of decide what maybe object that's in your claw machine that you can then try and grab and get out to prevent that from happening. Or they could alter your claw machine itself. And this includes things like adding oil into the machine so that you can't see what's going on. It could be that they add in some spiky mothballs, which then if you pick them up hurt you as they come out the other side. Or it could be that they put in some weird like catnip thing that then makes some of the objects start to jump around, and it's more difficult to actually keep them in one place because they're always moving. There's loads of variety here, from the enemies themselves, but also to the different ways how they attack. And so all of the things that you normally expect in an RPG, with things like poison or dodging or reflecting back damage, all of that is present here, and the enemies will utilise that repeatedly throughout, and it gets progressively more statusy the further you get into the game. The other thing that this game does is add in properties of objects. So you've got wooden objects, metal objects, glass objects, rubbish objects, or kind of plasticky rubbish objects, and you can transmute them through the alchemy shop as you go through the dungeons if you need to swap different types of object across. And the reason why that's of importance is that some of the things that you can collect apply to certain types of objects, and certain characters have affinities with certain types of objects too. So an example of this would be if you've picked up the character that loves all of the metallic objects, you can add in a magnet, which means that it will attract all of the metallic objects into your claw, which means potentially you can pick more up. But you can also then fill up your claw maybe with 25% or 50% water. And whilst that technically means that you will be struggling potentially to pick up some of this stuff that's in your claw machine, you can then get a battery which then electrifies all of the metallic objects so long as they're in water, which then means that they deal more damage. And so that works if you've gone down the metal route, but that totally wouldn't work if you went down the wood route, for example. And the plastic route has decaying objects. So they start off very strong at the beginning of a round, but each time you use the plastic knife, for example, it loses 33% of its damage. And so you're deciding when's the good time to whip out some of this stuff. Because it could be really strong in the early game, but not so good late game. And so you might want to start sorting out and binning some of the stuff in your deck as you get more things to add into your claw machine. And that's where the deck builder management side of this game comes into play. I mentioned characters earlier. There's loads, and they all play differently, and it's one of the greatest strengths of Dungeon Clawler, is not only does every run have a slightly differently generated dungeon to go through with forks in the road and different bosses to tackle, but all of the characters play differently too. Some can deal with attack and defense. There's a vampire that can only heal through the damage that you give because they have no ability to actually shield from damage. There's a pin doll that when you basically attack herself or cause damage to herself, it amplifies the attack that she then does out. So you kind of try a risk versus reward of how far can you push her damage before actually you put her in a vulnerable position. There's a beaver that deals specifically with lots of wood objects. There's a garbage man that deals primarily in lots of plastic, but throws in loads and loads and loads of things into their deck and then removes half of it like halfway through a run type thing. And so you're having to kind of play the odds of, I hope the right things end up in my claw machine. There's loads of different variety here, and genuinely each run feels unique and interesting depending on the character, the layout, the way you tackle the bosses, and also the choices that you make in the forks in the road, because some of it will be around choosing which type of battles or bosses you want to go for, but it will also depend on the type of events that happen too. There are loads of events, and some of them play out like a pachinko machine, where you bet some of your money that you earn through battles as to whether you can grab a new object, or decide to skip it if it's not really something for you, or re-roll it if you want to spend some more dosh. But again, it's not guaranteed that the pachinko machine will be kind to you if you don't time the event nicely. There's also kind of rotating bingo machine that spits out perks, and then you get to choose from the 2 or 3 that get spat out. And those perks are passive abilities that help your run over the course of time. And the more of those you get, the stronger your character becomes. And some of those are quite powerful, like shrinking down objects every turn, or adding in some shield or some health whenever you finish battles or start battles, for example. There's all different kinds of perks, and some of them feel character specific because I've not seen them pop up on certain runs compared to others. There's also the ability to go to a shop and upgrade your existing items in your deck too. And so each item has a base version and then like a beefed up golden version too. And this usually doubles or halves again a specific stat that it does. So if it did 15 damage before, it does 30 damage when it's golden. So again, investing in your coins is quite useful to do there. Or you can go to the alchemist and transmute objects from one property like glass or rubbish to another like wood or metal. All of this, again, is just options and choices that make every run feel engaging, unique and interesting. Add to that the excellent graphical style, a pleasant soundtrack, and claw-grabbing physics that don't feel like they've been stolen from the seaside, but give a fair nod to it. It feels fair, is what I'm trying to say, whereas the claw machines out there in the real world are just money-grabbing little snitches. How dare they? This at least feels consistent with what it does, and I really appreciate that. Not only is this game exceptionally well balanced from its moment-to-moment gameplay, the progression of difficulty tiers is also quite cool too. When you complete a run with a character, which I have to say didn't happen to me very often, but I loved trying, you unlock a lucky foot. And these lucky foots have different traits to them, and you can then take 3 lucky feet with you onto the next tier difficulty. And that tier of difficulty will basically make things harder for you in terms of having beefier enemies, but you'll also have things like you no longer heal after boss fights, for example, or you'll have 30% less health. So it's again just trying to up the ante, but in order to help you out, you take in some of those lucky feet which try to balance out some of this problem that you now have to tackle and deal with. So again, more options, more choices, more things to consider, and that's ultimately what I loved about Dungeon Clawler. It's a roguelike deck builder that has so much choice and player engagement whilst feeling and playing completely uniquely. There's just nothing else out there quite like it, and it's an absolute blast to play. Enjoyed it so much. I don't know how many 10 out of 10s I've given out this year, but this is absolutely a 10 out of 10 game. And it's still in early access, so just more content coming. What's not to love? Dungeon Clawler, out today. Higher Plane Games is part of the Higher Plane Network, a completely independent media outlet supported by people like you. The goal is to create the best possible content that cultivates a richer indie scene for games as well as music and entertainment. To find out more and to get involved, visit patreon.com/higherplane-network. Your support makes all the difference, and in return you'll gain access to bonus content and downloads. Thank you for watching.